14-year-old Marcus was scavenging for scraps behind a warehouse when he heard it, a barely there gasp in the snow. What he found made his blood run cold. A woman, 55, bleeding out in sub-zero temperatures, left to die. Her leather vest bore a symbol Marcus recognized from the news, the Hells Angels. This wasn't just any stranger. This was Margaret, mother of Reaper, one of the most dangerous men in the Brotherhood. Marcus had two choices: walk away and survive, or save her and risk everything. But what Marcus didn't know was that his decision would put a target on his back, because someone wanted Margaret dead. And when 1,000 bikers rolled into town demanding answers, Marcus realized he'd just walked into a war he couldn't escape. Welcome to Hells Angels family. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story will touch your heart in ways you won't expect. To my faithful subscribers who've been here from the beginning, may God continue to bless you abundantly. Before we dive in, let's lift this moment up in prayer. Heavenly Father, I come before you asking for your divine protection over everyone watching right now. Bless their families, Lord. Heal their bodies, provide for their needs, and give them peace that surpasses all understanding. Surround them with your favor, and let your presence be felt in their lives today. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Now, what you're about to witness isn't just a story about survival on the streets. It's about a 14-year-old homeless boy named Marcus who found a dying woman bleeding in the snow and made a choice that would change his life forever. A choice that put him in the crosshairs of a deadly betrayal, turned him into a wanted criminal, and ultimately brought 1,000 bikers together to deliver justice when a mother's life and her son's loyalty hung in the balance. Marcus's hands were numb, but he kept digging through the dumpster anyway. Frozen pizza crusts, half a bagel with green mold creeping across the edges, a McDonald's bag with 3 fries left inside, hard as plastic. This was survival in Chicago's winter. 14 years old, 6 months homeless, and every night a gamble on whether he'd wake up the next morning. The warehouse district near O'Hare International Airport was his hunting ground after dark. Travelers threw away more food than most people ate in a day. Business executives tossed entire sandwiches after 2 bites. Families discarded bags of unopened chips. But tonight, February 9th at 11:47 p.m., the blizzard had driven everyone inside. The airport shuttles had stopped running hours ago. The loading docks stood empty and silent. The wind cut through Marcus's 2-layered hoodies like they were tissue paper. His fingers had gone past pain into that dangerous numbness where you stop feeling anything at all. He'd lost sensation in his toes an hour ago. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees, and the wind chill made it feel like 20 below. Marcus knew the statistics. He'd overheard EMTs talking outside a shelter once. Hypothermia set in fast at these temperatures. You got confused, then sleepy, then you just didn't wake up. He was about to give up, head back to the abandoned maintenance shed he'd been squatting in for the past 2 weeks, when he heard it. A gasp, barely human, more like air escaping a punctured tire, weak and desperate. Marcus froze mid-step, one hand still gripping the dumpster's edge. Every instinct honed by 6 months on the streets screamed at him to run. Nothing good happened in this district after midnight. The loading docks were controlled by men who'd hurt you for looking at them wrong. He'd seen a kid get beaten unconscious last month for being in the wrong place, asking the wrong questions. But the sound came again, weaker this time, more desperate. A dying animal, maybe, or something worse. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs as he moved toward the sound, his sneakers crunching through snow that had already buried the sidewalk. The street lamp 2 blocks away cast long shadows across the industrial buildings, turning everything into shapes that could hide anything. Behind a stack of wooden pallets leaning against the warehouse's brick wall, he found her. A woman, 55, maybe older, hard to tell with her face so swollen. One eye completely shut, purple and grotesque. The other barely open, unfocused. Her nose sat at an angle that made Marcus's stomach turn. Blood pooled in the snow around her torso, already freezing into dark red ice that looked black in the dim light. She wore a black leather vest over a thermal shirt, and even in the darkness, Marcus recognized the symbol stitched on the back. Hells Angels. The skull with wings. The red and white letters. He'd seen it on the news, heard stories from other street kids about what happened to people who crossed them. About bodies found in the Chicago River. About witnesses who disappeared. And this woman, whoever she was, had been beaten within an inch of her life and left here to die in the snow like garbage. Marcus should have walked away. Should have pretended he never saw her. Should have gone back to his shed, buried himself in his cardboard nest, and forgotten this night ever happened. He had enough problems without getting tangled up in gang business. But her eyes opened. Just barely. The one that wasn't swollen shut found him in the darkness. And she looked directly at him with such desperate hope that it pierced straight through his chest. Help. The word came out as a wheeze, blood bubbling at the corner of her mouth, freezing on her lips. Marcus knelt down in the snow, his hands shaking, not from the cold anymore. I can't. There's no hospital I can take you to without questions. I'm just a kid. I don't have money. I don't have. Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with shocking strength for someone half dead. Her fingers dug into his skin like claws. Her lips moved, forming words he had to lean in close to hear over the wind. Reaper, traitor, don't trust. Her breath smelled like copper and something medicinal, sharp and chemical. Then her eyes rolled back and her grip went slack, her hand falling into the bloodstained snow. Marcus pressed 2 fingers to her neck the way he'd seen in movies. Pulse, faint and irregular, but there. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, rattling breaths that sounded wrong, like something inside was broken. He had maybe minutes to decide, maybe less. Walk away and she dies. Stay and whatever put her here might come back to finish the job and find him as a witness. Subscribe now. You'll want to see who Reaper is and why this woman was left to die. Marcus made his choice, not because he was brave, not because he was stupid, but because 6 months ago, when he was freezing on a Gary, Indiana sidewalk, a stranger had given him a coat and $20 without asking questions. Sometimes that's all it took. One person deciding you were worth saving. He hooked his arms under her shoulders and dragged her through the snow. She was heavier than he expected, dead weight that kept slipping from his grip. He fell twice, his knees cracking against ice-covered concrete. By the time he got her to the maintenance shed 3 blocks away, his lungs burned and his arms felt like they'd been ripped from their sockets. Inside, he laid her on the concrete floor as gently as he could and used his phone's flashlight to assess the damage. The battery was at 12%. He'd have to work fast. 3 cracked ribs, maybe 4, based on the unnatural dents in her side. A gash across her forehead still bleeding sluggishly. Bruises circling her throat like purple finger marks where someone had tried to strangle her. Her left hand was swollen, possibly broken, and her breathing, shallow, rattling, each exhale sounding like her last. Marcus had learned basic first aid in his last foster home before everything fell apart. The foster dad, Rick Holloway, had been an EMT before he started drinking, before the state took his license, before he decided foster kids were just monthly checks. But before all that, Rick had taught Marcus one thing. Pressure stops bleeding. Elevation prevents shock. And if someone's dying, you keep them warm or they're already gone. Marcus tore his cleanest hoodie, the gray one he'd stolen from a Walmart in Hammond, into strips. He packed the head wound with fabric, wrapping it tight enough to slow the bleeding, but not so tight it would cut off circulation. Then he wrapped her torso as best he could, feeling her cracked ribs shift under his hands, hearing her moan even in unconsciousness. He covered her with every piece of cardboard and fabric he'd scavenged over the past month. His sleeping bag, his blankets, the tarp that kept rain from dripping through the shed's broken roof. Everything. She needed it more than he did. He'd survive one cold night. She wouldn't survive the next hour without warmth. Her leather vest lay beside her, and Marcus rifled through the pockets with trembling fingers. No wallet. No ID. Someone had taken them, or she'd been smart enough not to bring them. But he found a phone, cracked screen, battery at 43%, still powered on. 17 missed calls, all from unknown number. He scrolled through her recent texts, and his blood went cold. Messages to someone named Danny. Affectionate messages. I know it's been 5 years, but I'm dying, sweetheart. Please, just let me see you one more time. Coordinates to the Hells Angels Clubhouse on South Cicero Avenue. Photos of a younger man with tattoos covering his arms, the same skull and wings symbol inked across his chest. And one final text from 5 hours ago. I'm here. Outside the clubhouse. Please, just talk to me. I'm your mother. I don't have much time left. Reaper's mother. Marcus looked at the woman again, seeing her differently now. This wasn't some gang enforcer who'd gotten caught in a turf war. This wasn't a criminal getting what she deserved. This was someone's mom, a dying woman who'd traveled from God knows where just to see her son one last time. And someone had beaten her half to death and dumped her in the snow like garbage. He kept searching, desperation making him thorough. In her jeans pocket, he found a medical alert bracelet, the metal cold against his fingers. The engraving stopped his heart. Margaret and Morrison, pancreatic cancer stage 4. Emergency meds, oxycodone, ondansetron. Emergency contact, Daniel Morrison, 555-0147. She was already dying. Stage 4 meant months at best, maybe weeks. And someone had decided to speed up the process, to make sure she never got to say goodbye to her son. Marcus sat back against the shed's metal wall, staring at Margaret's unconscious face. 6 months ago, he would have called 911 without hesitation. But 6 months ago, he still believed the system protected kids like him. Then his foster family kicked him out for stealing bread, and Child Protective Services stopped returning his calls. The shelters were full. The group homes had waiting lists. He learned fast. The world didn't care about homeless kids. You were invisible until you became a problem. If he called for help now, the police would ask questions. Why was he here? Why didn't he call immediately? His face would go into the system. They'd separate them, take Margaret to a hospital where whoever wanted her dead might have access, and Marcus would disappear into juvie or worse. No, he had to figure this out alone, like he'd figured out everything else since Gary. Drop a comment right now. Tell us where you're watching from before this gets darker. Margaret's phone buzzed in his hand, the vibration startling him so badly he almost dropped it. A new text message from Daniel, Reaper. Mom, if you're reading this, don't trust anyone who says they're helping you. The person who wants you dead is closer than you think. I'm coming for you. Hold on. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He read it 3 times, trying to understand. Someone inside Reaper's circle had set this up. Someone Margaret trusted enough to meet in Chicago during a blizzard. Someone who knew exactly when and where she'd be vulnerable. He scrolled through her call history. The last outgoing call was to a contact labeled Old Friend Cage. Duration, for minutes, 37 seconds. 47 minutes before Marcus found her bleeding in the snow. Outside, a sound cut through the howling wind. Low and mechanical, growing louder with each passing second. Motorcycle engines. Multiple. Moving in formation. Marcus crawled to the shed's cracked window and peered through the gap. Headlights flooded the warehouse district. Dozens of them, maybe more, moving in coordinated search patterns. The bikes split into groups, some heading north toward the airport, others sweeping south through the industrial zone. They were methodical, professional, hunting. They were looking for her, and they were getting closer to his shed with every passing second. Marcus looked down at his hands, still covered in Margaret's blood, dark and sticky, already drying under his fingernails. Then at her phone, still lit up with Reaper's warning message glowing in the darkness. Then at Margaret herself, barely breathing, her face gray in the dim light. The motorcycles were 2 blocks away now, their engines a unified roar that shook the shed's walls. Margaret stirred, her lips moving soundlessly, forming words only she could hear. And Marcus realized with sinking, absolute certainty that by saving her life, he might have just signed his own death warrant. Someone powerful wanted Margaret Morrison dead. Someone who had the resources to lure her across the country, beat her within an inch of her life, and coordinate a search party of bikers to finish the job. And now, Marcus, 14 years old, homeless, invisible to the world, was the only thing standing between her and whoever had left her bleeding in the snow. The engines grew louder, closer. Headlights swept across the shed's exterior wall, gaps of light slicing through the cracks. And through the window, Marcus saw the first bike turn onto his street, followed by 3 more, their riders scanning the shadows with flashlights that cut through the blizzard like searchlights. They were coming. Marcus held his breath as the motorcycles circled the warehouse district. Through the shed's cracked window, he counted 7 bikes, their headlights cutting through the blizzard in coordinated sweeps. The riders moved like soldiers, precise, methodical, leaving no shadow unchecked. One bike stopped 50 feet from his hiding spot, the engine idling as the rider dismounted and approached a dumpster Marcus had been digging through an hour earlier. The biker was massive, easily 6'4", with a beard that reached his chest. His leather vest bore patches Marcus couldn't read from this distance, but the skull and wings insignia was unmistakable. The man swept his flashlight across the alley, pausing on the drag marks in the snow. Margaret's blood trail leading directly toward the shed. Marcus's heart stopped. He'd been so focused on saving her, he hadn't thought to cover their tracks. The blood looked black against white snow, an arrow pointing straight to them. But the biker's radio crackled. Sector 4 clear. Moving to Cicero Avenue. The man returned to his bike and roared off, the drag marks somehow missed in the blizzard's chaos. Marcus exhaled, his whole body shaking. They'd gotten lucky. But luck ran out fast on Chicago's streets. He looked at Margaret, still unconscious, her breathing shallow and rattling. Her medical alert bracelet glinted in his phone's dying light. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Emergency medications. Oxycodone for pain, ondansetron for nausea. Without them, she'd suffer even if she survived the beating. Marcus made a decision that terrified him. He had to leave the shed, had to get her medication. Had to risk exposure because watching her die slowly felt worse than getting caught. He tucked his stolen blankets tighter around Margaret and slipped into the blizzard. The nearest pharmacy was a 24-hour Walgreens on Chicago's north side, 3 miles through territory he'd normally avoid after dark. But normal had ended the moment he found a dying woman in the snow. The walk took 40 minutes. His feet went numb by minute 15. By minute 30, he couldn't feel his face. But he kept moving, kept his head down, stayed in the shadows between street lamps where security cameras couldn't catch his face. The Walgreens glowed like a beacon at 1:23 a.m. Inside, a bored clerk scrolled through his phone behind the counter, barely looking up as Marcus entered. The store was empty except for a drunk man arguing with the self-checkout machine. Marcus moved through the aisles with practiced efficiency. 6 months homeless had taught him how to steal without getting caught. Move with purpose, look like you belong, never hesitate. He found the pain medication aisle and grabbed 2 bottles of generic ibuprofen. Not oxycodone, but better than nothing. Anti-nausea medication. Bandages. Antiseptic. Everything disappeared into his hoodie's oversized pockets. He was heading for the exit when he saw it. The pharmacy counter and back, protected by a half-height barrier. Real prescription medications. The kind Margaret actually needed. The kind that would keep her alive long enough to see her son. Marcus glanced at the clerk, still absorbed in his phone. The security camera above the pharmacy rotated slowly, scanning the store in 30-second intervals. He had maybe 15 seconds while it faced the opposite direction. He vaulted the barrier and grabbed 2 prescription bottles labeled with names he didn't recognize. Oxycodone. Ondansetron. Exactly what Margaret's bracelet listed. He shoved them in his pockets and ran for the exit, his heart hammering so loud he thought everyone could hear it. Hey, stop! The clerk's voice exploded behind him, but Marcus was already through the automatic doors, sprinting into the blizzard. He didn't look back, didn't stop until he was 6 blocks away, gasping in an alley, his lungs burning from cold and exertion. The medication pressed against his ribs like evidence of a crime he'd just committed, because that's what it was. Theft. Breaking and entering. He'd just graduated from homeless kid to criminal. But Margaret needed these pills to survive. And survival justified almost anything when you were desperate enough. Like and subscribe. This story gets more dangerous with every choice Marcus makes. Marcus returned to the shed at 2:17 a.m. to find it empty. Panic seized his chest. The blankets lay scattered. Margaret's phone sat abandoned on the concrete. Blood smeared the floor where he'd left her. And the door he'd carefully closed, stood wide open, snow drifting inside. No, 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 no. Marcus spun in circles, searching the darkness. Had they found her? Had she woken up and wandered into the blizzard, delirious? Looking for someone? The voice came from behind a stack of crates. Marcus whirled around. Margaret stood there, leaning against the wall for support, one hand pressed to her cracked ribs. She looked terrible, face swollen, movement stiff with pain. But her eyes were sharp and focused. Alive. You came back, she said, her voice rough but steady. Most people would have run. You needed medication. Marcus held out the stolen bottles. I didn't know the dosages, so I just... You robbed a pharmacy for me. Margaret took the pills, reading the labels. Something flickered across her face, gratitude mixed with guilt. You just made yourself a criminal for a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore. Marcus closed the shed door. Your son texted. Said someone close to him wants you dead. Said not to trust anyone. Margaret's jaw tightened. She dry-swallowed 2 oxycodone pills and leaned against the wall. He's right. Someone lured me to Chicago using fake emails. They cloned my account, sent messages to old contacts pretending to be me, asking for Reaper's location. When I finally reached the clubhouse tonight, someone I trusted told me to meet them behind the warehouse to talk privately before facing Reaper. Said it would be safer than the clubhouse. She laughed bitterly. I walked right into it. Who? Marcus asked. Who did you trust? A man named Cage. He was Reaper's best friend growing up, like a brother to him. I've known Cage since he was 16 years old. I used to make him dinner when he'd visit our house in Oakland. Margaret's voice cracked. I never thought he'd. Outside, motorcycle engines roared back to life. Closer this time. Margaret's eyes widened. They're doing another sweep, Marcus whispered. We need to move. No. Margaret grabbed his arm. Listen to me. This isn't just about someone wanting me dead. There's a rival gang, the Iron Skulls. They've been trying to start a war with the Angels for months. If they kill me, Reaper will retaliate. Hundreds of people will die in a gang war that'll tear Chicago apart. Marcus's stomach dropped. So this is bigger than just you. Much bigger. Margaret's grip tightened. And you're caught in the middle of it now. The shed's walls vibrated as motorcycles surrounded the building. Voices shouted commands. Flashlight beams sliced through the cracks. And then Marcus heard something that made his blood freeze. 2 bikers talking just outside the shed, their voices carrying through the thin walls. Cage wants her found before Reaper does. Dead or alive. Boss said it makes no difference now. What about witnesses? Anyone who's seen her doesn't leave Chicago breathing. Subscribe now. Marcus just became the witness they're hunting for. Marcus looked at Margaret, watching the realization dawn on her face. There weren't just angels searching for her. There were 2 separate hunts happening. Reaper trying to find his mother, and Cage's people trying to finish what they started. And somehow, Cage was coordinating both, playing both sides. The voices moved away, engines revving as the bikes continued their search pattern. Margaret's phone buzzed on the floor. Marcus picked it up, reading the new message. Reaper. Mom, I'm tracking your phone's last location. Stay hidden. I'm coming for you. Don't trust anyone until you see me. Especially not Cage. Margaret's face went pale. He knows. Reaper knows Cage is the traitor. Then we need to reach him, Marcus said. Tell him where you are. No. Margaret shook her head. If Reaper comes here, Cage will follow. And if they confront each other. She trailed off, but Marcus understood. If Reaper confronted his best friend, one of them wouldn't leave alive. And Margaret would have to watch her son either die or become a murderer. The phone buzzed again. Another message. But this time not from Reaper. Unknown number. I know you're with the homeless kid. I know you're alive. Bring her to 47th and Ashland in 1 hour, or I'll make sure every cop in Chicago knows the kid's face. His choice. Prison for robbery and kidnapping, or he hands you over and walks away rich. Clock's ticking. Marcus's stolen pharmacy run had been caught on camera. His face was evidence now. And whoever sent this message, Cage, most likely, had just turned him from a witness into a target. Margaret looked at him with tears in her eyes. Marcus, you need to run. Leave me here and disappear. This isn't your fight. But Marcus thought about the last 6 months, the cold nights, the hunger, the invisibility. How no one had cared whether he lived or died. Until tonight, when a dying woman grabbed his wrist and asked for help. I'm not leaving you, he said. Outside, a single motorcycle engine approached. Different from the others, deeper, more powerful. It stopped directly outside the shed. Heavy footsteps crunched through snow. And then a voice Marcus had never heard before called out, rough and desperate. Mom? If you're in there, it's me. It's Danny. Reaper had found them. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, years of grief and hope colliding in her expression. She moved toward the door, but Marcus grabbed her shoulder. Wait, he whispered. What if it's a trap? Before Margaret could answer, a second voice rang out from the darkness, cheerful and familiar. Reaper, brother, over here. I found something. Margaret's entire body went rigid. Her face drained of all color. That voice, she breathed. That's Cage. Through the window, Marcus watched a figure emerge from the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a Hell's Angels vest. Cage, walking straight toward Reaper with a smile on his face and a gun hidden behind his back. Reaper turned, completely unaware he was about to be betrayed by the man he'd trusted his entire life. Marcus watched through the cracked window as Cage closed the distance between himself and Reaper, that easy smile plastered across his weathered face, while his right hand stayed carefully hidden behind his back. The snow swirled between them, creating momentary curtains of white that obscured and revealed in equal measure. Reaper stood with his back partially turned, one hand shading his eyes as he scanned the warehouse district, completely vulnerable to what was coming. In 3 seconds, maybe 4, Cage would be close enough to put a bullet in Reaper's skull and make it look like a rival gang hit. Another casualty in the endless war between clubs. Nobody would question it. Nobody except Margaret, who was gripping Marcus's shoulder so hard her fingernails drew blood through his hoodie. She was watching her son, the man she'd crossed the country to see one last time before cancer took her, walk into an execution orchestrated by someone he'd trusted since they were teenagers. And she was too broken, too weak from the beating and her illness to do anything but watch. But Marcus wasn't weak, and he wasn't standing aside while someone got murdered right in front of him. His eyes swept the shed's interior, searching for anything he could use. A length of chain, broken bottles, a rusted pipe wrench hanging from the workbench, its metal head heavy enough to do damage. He grabbed the wrench, feeling its weight, calculating distance and trajectory the way he'd learned throwing rocks at rats in alleyways. What are you doing? Margaret hissed, but Marcus was already moving. He kicked the shed door open, the crash echoing across the snow-covered lot, and hurled the wrench with everything he had. His shoulders screamed from the effort. The wrench sailed through the blizzard in a perfect arc and smashed through a warehouse window 40 feet away. Glass exploded inward with a sound like a gunshot, shards catching streetlight and glittering as they fell. Reaper spun instantly, his hand going to his waistband with the practiced speed of someone who'd survived too many ambushes. Cage froze mid-step, caught off guard, his hidden gun now completely visible as his arm swung forward reflexively. The weapon gleamed dull black against the white snow. For one suspended heartbeat, the two men stared at each other, brothers in all but blood, family forged in violence and loyalty. And Marcus saw the exact moment Reaper understood. The exact moment 20 years of friendship shattered like that warehouse window. Cage. Reaper's voice was low and dangerous, the kind of quiet that preceded explosions. What's in your hand? Cage recovered quickly. He was good at this. Practiced. Decades of lying had made him smooth. His smile never faltered as he shifted his weight, turning the gun toward the broken window instead of Reaper. Heard something suspicious, brother. Thought someone was about to jump you from that warehouse. He gestured with his free hand, movements casual, innocent. See? Could have been an ambush. Good thing I was watching your back. Then why was the gun pointed at me? Reaper hadn't moved, hadn't relaxed. His hand stayed near his own weapon. Paranoia, man. You know how it is these days. Cage slowly holstered his weapon, making a show of it. like this was all some terrible misunderstanding between old friends. We've been searching for your mom for hours. Everyone's on edge. The skulls could be anywhere. When I saw you standing alone in the open, I thought, hell, I don't know what I thought. Instinct took over. You thought what? Reaper stepped closer, and Marcus recognized the body language shift. Predators circling prey. That I wouldn't notice you've been feeding information to the Iron Skulls for 6 months? That I wouldn't find the offshore accounts in the Caymans? The intercepted emails from my mother's cloned account. Cage's smile finally cracked. Just for a second, barely a flicker, but Marcus saw it from 50 feet away. The mask slipping. The truth bleeding through. Brother, I don't know what you're. Don't. Reaper's voice cut through the wind like a blade. Don't call me brother. Don't insult me with more lies. I've known for 3 weeks, Cage. 3 weeks I've been watching you, documenting every move, waiting to see how deep the betrayal went, how many people you'd sold out, whether you'd actually go through with it. The blizzard howled between them, snow swirling in vortexes that made them look like ghosts. More motorcycle engines approached from the east, backup arriving, drawn by the commotion, but Marcus couldn't tell whose side they were on. Everything felt balanced on a knife's edge. Where is she, Cage? Reaper's hand hovered over his gun now, not threatening, but ready. Where's my mother? Because she called you 5 hours ago. You told her to meet you behind the warehouse for a private conversation before facing me. And now she's missing. There's blood in the snow, and you're standing here with a gun behind your back. Cage's jaw clenched. His eyes darted to the approaching headlights, calculating odds, measuring escape routes. His hand twitched toward his weapon, but 6 more bikes roared into view, their riders forming a circle around the 2 men. The bearded biker Marcus recognized from earlier dismounted first, his massive frame blocking any exit. This is club business, the bearded man announced, his voice carrying authority. Whatever's happening here gets settled by the code, by the Brotherhood. No one draws until we hear both sides and vote on it. Like and subscribe. Reaper's next move will change everything for Marcus and Margaret. Margaret pulled Marcus back from the doorway, her grip surprisingly strong despite broken ribs and internal bleeding. We need to leave, she whispered urgently. Now, while they're distracted with their standoff. Once that circle closes, once they start club business, it'll take hours. And if Cage convinces them I'm already dead, how do we leave? Marcus gestured at the warehouse district. There's bikes everywhere. Someone will see us. Margaret's eyes, sharp despite the pain medication dulling her system, scanned their surroundings. She pointed south with a trembling hand, toward the railroad tracks cutting through the industrial zone like a scar. Freight trains run through here every hour heading to Milwaukee. See that signal light? It's yellow. Means a train's coming within 10 minutes. If we can reach those tracks before they finish their standoff. They slipped out the shed's back exit, using the building as cover, moving parallel to the confrontation but staying in shadows. Margaret moved like someone 3 times her age, each step clearly agony, her breathing harsh and wet. But fear and a mother's desperate need to protect her son kept her upright. Marcus supported half her weight, practically dragging her through snow that had drifted waist-high in places. Behind them, voices erupted, the confrontation escalating. Marcus heard Cage's voice rising, defensive, weaving a story about loyalty and misunderstandings. Heard Reaper's voice cutting through the lies, cold and factual, presenting evidence. The gathered bikers murmuring, choosing sides, the Brotherhood fracturing in real time. They had minutes before someone noticed the empty shed. Maybe seconds. The railroad tracks materialized out of the blizzard like salvation. And right on schedule, Marcus felt the vibration through his feet before he heard the train, a freight line approaching from the north, its headlight piercing the storm. The train wasn't stopping, never did in this section, but it was slowing for the junction ahead where tracks diverged toward Milwaukee and Detroit. Marcus had hopped moving trains before, twice when running from police in Gary. Once in Hammond when a shelter security guard got too interested in why he had bruises. But never while helping a 55-year-old cancer patient with cracked ribs escape from gang members who wanted her dead. Can you run? He asked, already knowing the answer was no, but needing to hear her say it. I don't have a choice, Margaret said through gritted teeth. Neither of us do. The train rumbled past, each boxcar and tanker creating a temporary wall between them and the warehouse district. Marcus spotted an open boxcar about 20 cars back, its sliding door half open like an invitation. There, you see it? On three, we run and jump together. Don't let go of my hand. They ran alongside the accelerating train, Marcus's hand locked around Margaret's thin wrist. Snow flew into their faces. The train's wheels screeched on frozen rails. Marcus counted the rhythm of Margaret's labored breathing, timing their jump to when she'd have enough oxygen. 1, 2, 3. He jumped first, caught the boxcar's edge with his free hand, his feet scrabbling against the metal exterior. Then he pulled with every ounce of strength left in his 14-year-old frame. Margaret weighed almost nothing, her body ravaged by cancer and violence. But gravity and momentum fought against him. For one terrible second, he thought he'd lose her, thought she'd fall beneath the wheels. Then his other hand found hers, and he hauled her inside just as the train picked up speed, leaving Chicago's south side behind. They collapsed on the boxcar floor, gasping, their breath fogging in the frigid air. The interior smelled like rust and old grain, musty and forgotten, but it was shelter, for walls and a roof. Margaret immediately fumbled for the oxycodone, swallowing 2 pills dry, her hands shaking so badly she dropped 3 before getting them to her mouth. "Thank you," she said after her breathing steadied enough to speak. "For the distraction back there. For saving my son's life. For all of it. You didn't have to do any of this." Marcus sat against the boxcar wall, exhaustion crashing over him in waves. His muscles burned. His head pounded. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten anything substantial. Why does Cage want you dead so badly? I get that he's working with the Iron Skulls, but this feels personal. Like he's not just starting a war. He specifically wants you gone. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, watching Chicago's lights disappear into the distance through the open door. The city that had almost killed both of them fading into memory. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades of buried secrets. "I told you about Cage betraying the Angels. About the Iron Skulls wanting to start a war that'll tear the Midwest apart. But I didn't tell you why it's personal for them. Why I'm not just a target of opportunity, but the target." She pulled her leather vest tighter against the cold. 35 years ago, long before Reaper was born, I was married to a man named Victor Castellano. He founded the Iron Skulls in Oakland when I was 19. I was 20 when we married, stupid and young, and convinced the outlaw life was romantic instead of the nightmare it became. Marcus listened, watching this dying woman unpack a lifetime of regrets. By 22, I was pregnant and finally seeing clearly. Victor was building an empire on violence, drugs, and blood. The club came first. Always. Before me, before our unborn child, before any concept of family that didn't serve the brotherhood. Margaret's voice fractured. Victor died in a gang war when Reaper was 6 months old. Hell's Angels killed him during a territory dispute in Oakland. Shot him outside a bar at 2 in the morning over something that probably doesn't even matter anymore. "So you ran," Marcus said, understanding beginning to dawn. "I took my infant son, changed our last name from Castellano to Morrison, and moved 300 miles across California. Worked double shifts as a nurse to keep us fed. Tried to give Reaper a normal life, a clean life, away from clubs and colors and violence." Margaret wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "But genetics don't lie. Blood calls to blood. By 15, he was running with Angels. By 20, he was patched in with full colors. My son joined the club that killed his father, and I couldn't stop him. Wouldn't even speak to me for 5 years after I tried. Subscribe now, or you'll miss how Marcus survives being labeled a kidnapper. The Iron Skulls see you as a traitor," Marcus said, the full picture crystallizing. "Worse than a traitor. I'm a symbol of everything they hate. Victor's widow who abandoned the legacy, who raised his son to ride with their enemies. They've wanted revenge for 35 years. Margaret's hands trembled. And Cage, his older brother Ramon, was one of the Skulls who died in the same war that killed Victor. When Cage befriended Reaper 20 years ago at a bike rally, I thought it was genuine. Two kids from broken club families finding brotherhood. But he's been playing the longest game imaginable. Infiltrating the angels, rising through ranks, getting close to my son, waiting for the perfect moment to take his revenge and trigger the war that'll finally destroy both clubs forever. The train rocked beneath them, carrying them northeast toward Milwaukee and what Marcus desperately hoped was temporary safety. But Margaret's phone, still in Marcus's pocket from the shed, buzzed with incoming notifications. The vibrations felt like warning signals against his ribs. He pulled it out, and his blood turned to ice water. 23 news alerts, all showing the same image. Crystal clear security camera footage from the Walgreens. Marcus's face caught in perfect detail as he vaulted the pharmacy counter and grabbed prescription bottles. The headline blazed across the screen. Homeless teen wanted for pharmacy robbery. Police believe he's holding cancer patient hostage. Margaret leaned over to see the screen, and her face went ashen. Her photo appeared below Marcus's, an old DMV picture that made her look healthy and normal, nothing like the broken woman sitting in this boxcar. The caption listed her as a missing person connected to gang violence. The news anchor's voice played on autoplay. Authorities are searching for this juvenile suspect, described as dangerous and possibly armed. Police believe he may be holding 55-year-old Margaret Morrison against her will after robbing a Northside pharmacy earlier this morning. If you see this individual, do not approach. Call 911 immediately. The suspect is considered extremely dangerous. They've turned you into the villain, Margaret whispered, horror in her voice. Cage must have fed this to the media. Called in an anonymous tip. Now the police are hunting you. The angels think you kidnapped me, and the Iron Skulls want us both dead. You're 14 years old, and your face is on every news channel in Illinois. Marcus stared at his own image. The camera had caught him mid-jump, face twisted in desperation and fear, looking every bit the dangerous criminal they were describing. 14 years old, homeless, now wanted by every cop in the state. If they caught him, he'd disappear into the juvenile justice system, probably tried as an adult for armed robbery and kidnapping. His life was over before it had really begun, before he'd even had a chance. The train's whistle screamed as they approached Milwaukee's outskirts, the sound piercing and mournful. And then Marcus's burner phone, the prepaid piece of junk he'd stolen from a gas station 3 days ago, the one only he knew existed, started ringing. The generic ringtone felt obscenely loud in the boxcar. The caller ID read, Cage. Margaret and Marcus locked eyes, pure terror passing between them. The burner phone was untraceable, unregistered, bought with cash from a shell corporation. There was absolutely no way Cage should have this number. No possible way he could know it existed. Unless, he's been tracking us, Margaret breathed, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. The whole time. Not just my phone, yours too. He must have surveillance at that gas station. Cameras that caught you stealing the phone. He's known exactly where we are since the moment we left that shed. The train began its emergency brake sequence, the screech of metal on metal deafening. Through the boxcar's open door, Marcus saw flashing red and blue lights painting the snow. Police cars, at least a dozen. News vans with satellite dishes. And a massive convoy of motorcycles blocking the tracks ahead, their riders dismounting with weapons clearly visible. Margaret's face appeared on every phone screen in the crowd below. And beside her photo, Marcus's face with the word suspect in bold red letters, repeated on loop like a manhunt in real time. The phone kept ringing. Cage, calling to gloat. Calling to let them know there was nowhere left to run. Calling because he'd won and wanted them to know it before the end. Marcus looked at Margaret, then at the armed crowd surrounding the stopped train, then back at the phone vibrating in his palm. Every option was bad, but some answers were worse than the questions. He answered it. Marcus pressed the phone to his ear, his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it. Cage's voice came through the speaker smooth and calculated, like a CEO negotiating a merger instead of a man who'd just tried to murder his best friend's dying mother. Smart kid. You've survived longer than I expected. Marcus said nothing. His throat had closed up. His tongue felt like sandpaper. and his heart hammered so hard he could hear it in his ears. Through the boxcar door, he watched the scene below unfold like a nightmare in slow motion. Police officers coordinating with bikers, everyone searching methodically for him and Margaret. They were trapped on a stopped train with armed law enforcement closing in from both directions and nowhere to run. I'm impressed, honestly. Cage continued, his tone almost friendly, conversational. Most 14-year-old homeless kids would have walked right past a dying woman in the snow. Self-preservation, you know? But you saved Margaret's life. You dragged her to safety, stole medication for her, even threw that wrench to save Reaper from my bullet. That took guts. You've got a hero complex, Marcus. And in this world, that's going to get you killed unless you listen very carefully to what I'm about to offer. I'm listening. Marcus finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper, cracking on the second word. Good. You're smart. I like that. Cage's voice shifted, becoming businesslike. Here's the situation, and I want you to really understand what you're facing. Every cop in the Midwest is looking for you right now. Your face is on every news channel from here to Detroit. CNN, Fox, local stations, everyone. They think you're a dangerous criminal holding an innocent cancer patient hostage. They think you're armed. They think you're desperate. Without my help, you'll spend the next decade in juvenile detention, then get transferred to adult prison when you turn 18. You'll be 25 before you see freedom again, and by then, you'll be just another statistic. Another broken kid who made bad choices and got swallowed by the system. Cage paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Marcus felt Margaret's hand grip his arm, her nails digging in, shaking her head frantically. But he kept listening because sometimes you had to hear the devil's offer to understand what you were really fighting against. But it doesn't have to be that way, Cage continued. You're not a bad kid, Marcus. You're just unlucky, and I can change your luck with one phone call. Here's what I'm offering. Bring Margaret to me. There's an abandoned furniture warehouse at 1247 Indianapolis Boulevard in Hammond, Indiana. Your old neighborhood, actually. You know the area, so you know how to get there without being seen. Bring her there in 2 hours, and I'll clear your name completely. I'll call the police myself. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding, that Margaret reached out to you for help and the media got it wrong. You'll be a hero instead of a criminal. Marcus's stomach churned. And I'll give you $50,000. Cash. Untraceable bills in a backpack. Enough to start over somewhere far from Chicago. California, maybe. Or down south where it's warm. New identity, new life, new chance. You'll be free, Marcus. Actually free for the first time since your foster family kicked you out. What happens to Margaret? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer, needed to hear Cage say it out loud. That's not your problem anymore. She's dying anyway. 6 months at most according to her medical records. I'm just accelerating the inevitable. You walk away clean, and Margaret's suffering ends. Everyone wins. Cage's voice hardened, the friendly mask slipping. And if you don't take this deal? Then I make sure every biker in the Midwest is hunting you. Every cop believes you're a kidnapper and a threat. And when they finally catch you, and they will, Marcus, because you're a kid with no resources and nowhere to hide, you'll disappear into the system and no one will ever care what happened to the homeless boy who made bad choices. You'll be forgotten before your first week in juvie ends. The line went dead before Marcus could respond. He lowered the phone slowly, his hand numb. Margaret's eyes were red, tears streaming down her swollen face. You can't trust him, she said, her voice hoarse and desperate. The moment you bring me there, he'll kill us both. He'll stage it to look like you murdered me, then killed yourself. Or he'll shoot you and claim self-defense. You'll be the villain who kidnapped and murdered a cancer patient. Your name will be dirt forever. Marcus knew she was right. Every instinct screamed that Cage's offer was poisoned from the beginning. But he also knew they were out of options. The police were closing in, moving car by car through the freight train. The bikers circled the area like sharks. And somewhere behind them in Chicago, Reaper was probably still dealing with the club confrontation that would determine whether Cage's betrayal was exposed or successfully buried under lies. Like and subscribe. Marcus is walking into something far worse than he realizes. We're not going to Hammond. Marcus said quietly, his mind racing through possibilities. But we're going to make Cage think we are while we contact Reaper directly. He opened Margaret's text messages and found Reaper's number. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. One message could save them or doom them, depending entirely on whether Reaper believed the truth or the carefully constructed lies Cage had been feeding him for years. Marcus typed carefully. It's the homeless kid who saved your mom. She's alive but badly hurt. Cage tried to kill her behind the warehouse and framed me for kidnapping. He just offered me $50,000 to bring her to Hammond in 2 hours. It's a trap. He wants us both dead. If you want proof your mom is really with me and this isn't fake, ask her what nickname she called you when you broke your arm at age 8. Marcus. He showed Margaret the message before sending. She read it twice, then nodded, her voice cracking with emotion. Danny Turtle. I called him that for months because he moved so slow in his cast, shuffling around the house. He hated it so much, used to turn bright red when I said it in front of his friends. Marcus hit send and waited. 30 seconds felt like 30 years compressed into heartbeats. The police were boarding the train now, moving systematically through each car, checking every boxcar and container. They had maybe 5 minutes before armed officers reached their position. The phone buzzed. Reaper. Danny Turtle. Jesus Christ. No one alive knows that except my mom. Where are you? I'll come get you right now. Cage is gone. He ran when I presented financial evidence to the club. They voted him out unanimously. He's exiled and stripped of his patch, but he's dangerous and has nothing left to lose. Margaret grabbed the phone with trembling fingers and typed. It's me, baby. It's really me. I'm so sorry I came to Chicago. So sorry I put you in this position. The kid saved my life. Marcus. He's 14 and homeless, and Cage just offered him money to hand me over in Hammond. It's a setup. He wants to kill us both and blame Marcus for everything. We need help, Danny. I'm scared. The response came within seconds. Reaper, Mom. God, I thought you were dead. Cage showed the club photos of blood in the snow. Said the Iron Skulls got to you first. We were planning retaliation. Hammond is 40 minutes from Milwaukee. I can be there in 30 if I leave right now with my brothers. But listen carefully, don't go to that warehouse. It's deep in Iron Skull's territory. Cage is using you as bait to draw me out and finish what he started. Meet me somewhere public. Somewhere with cameras and witnesses where he can't make you both disappear. Marcus thought fast, his mind flipping through memories of Hammond before his life collapsed. There's a diner on 165th Street. The Starlight. Always packed, even at 3 in the morning. Truckers stop there on their routes. Cameras everywhere. Public enough that he can't just shoot us without consequences. Margaret typed the address and hit send. Reaper responded immediately. I know that place. I'll meet you there in 45 minutes. Bringing 3 of my most trusted brothers. Men I've known since we were kids. Men Cage hasn't corrupted. We'll protect you both. Hold on, Mom. I'm coming. I never stopped loving you. Margaret broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Years of estrangement and pain pouring out in that grimy boxcar while police searched for them below. They slipped off the train while officers checked the forward cars, moving through Milwaukee's industrial district like ghosts. Marcus used the last of his stolen cash, $18 and change, to pay a truck driver $20 for a ride to Hammond. The man was older, weathered, with kind eyes that didn't ask questions. He just turned up his country music radio station and drove south while Marcus and Margaret huddled in the passenger seat, exhausted and terrified. 45 minutes later, they walked into the Starlight Diner on 165th Street. The place was exactly as Marcus remembered from his foster care days. Harsh fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick, cracked red vinyl booths with duct tape covering the worst tears, the overwhelming smell of burnt coffee and grease and pie. A dozen truckers occupied various tables, heads down over their meals. 2 tired waitresses worked the counter, moving on autopilot. Security cameras hung in every corner, their red recording lights blinking like mechanical eyes. Reaper sat in the back booth, and Marcus recognized him immediately from Margaret's phone photos. 37 years old, heavily tattooed, muscular from prison workouts, wearing his leather vest with the skull and wings insignia prominently displayed. But his eyes were his mother's. The same shade of green, the same intensity, the same pain buried deep. Margaret started crying the moment she saw him, her legs nearly giving out. "Danny, sit down. Both of you." Reaper's voice was cold, flat, emotionless. Marcus's stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. 3 other men sat in the booth with Reaper, all wearing Angel's vests, all watching them with unreadable expressions. And the man in the middle, sitting right next to Reaper like they were still brothers, was Cage. The diner went silent. Every trucker suddenly found their plates absolutely fascinating. The waitresses disappeared into the kitchen, wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. This had been a setup from the beginning, and Marcus had walked them both straight into it. Cage smiled, that same friendly expression he'd worn in the snow while hiding a gun behind his back. "Told you the kid would lead us straight to her, Reaper. Told you he'd fall for the oldest trick in the book. Prey always runs to what they think is safety." Marcus's brain screamed that something was catastrophically, fatally wrong. Margaret grabbed his hand, her grip like iron despite her weakness and injuries. "Danny, please. He's lying. He tried to kill me. He's the traitor. He's been working with the Iron Skulls for years." Reaper stood slowly, his massive frame unfolding from the booth. He walked toward Margaret, and for one suspended moment, Marcus saw a raw emotion flicker across his features. Pain, longing, regret. 5 years of missing his mother compressed into one heartbeat of vulnerability. Then the mask came back down, and Reaper spoke, his voice completely devoid of feeling. "Mom, you shouldn't have come to Chicago. You shouldn't have involved this kid. You shouldn't have made me choose between family and the club. The brotherhood is everything. It's all I have." He turned to Cage, and Marcus felt reality fracturing. Do what needs to be done. Subscribe now or miss what happens when the diner explodes with chaos. Cage pulled out a gun, black, professional, silencer already attached. The metal caught fluorescent light as he leveled it at Margaret's chest. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, not fear, but heartbreak. Complete devastation. "Danny, please. I'm your mother. I'm dying already. Please don't let him." But Reaper walked toward the exit without looking back, his shoulders rigid, and Marcus realized with sinking, absolute horror that Reaper either didn't believe them, or worse, he was complicit. Maybe the Brotherhood meant more than blood. Maybe Cage's lies had been more convincing than a mother's desperate truth. Maybe Marcus had misjudged everything from the beginning. Cage's finger moved to the trigger. "Nothing personal, kid. Wrong place, wrong time. You should have taken my 50,000 and disappeared. Now you're just another casualty." Marcus closed his eyes, waiting for the gunshot that would end everything. His short, brutal life flashing in fragments. Foster homes, hunger, cold nights, and finally this. Dying in a Hammond diner at 14 for trying to do one good thing. But instead, he heard glass shattering. The diner's front window exploded inward in a shower of fragments that caught light like diamonds. Hundreds of motorcycle engines surrounded the building, their collective roar drowning out everything else, shaking the walls, making coffee cups rattle in saucers. And standing at the entrance, backlit by headlights that turned her into a dark silhouette, was a woman in her 30s with an angel's patch on her leather vest and a vicious scar cutting diagonally across her face from forehead to jaw. She looked directly at Cage with eyes that promised violence, and her voice carried across the frozen diner like a judge pronouncing a death sentence. "Hello, brother." Cage's face went white as snow. The gun wavered in his hand, no longer pointed at Margaret, but drifting toward this new threat. His mouth opened and closed wordlessly, and Marcus realized that whoever this woman was, she'd just changed everything. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. The woman stepped through the shattered glass, boots crunching fragments into powder. Behind her, bikers filed into the diner, not dozens, but what looked like hundreds outside, their headlights turning the street into daylight. She moved with lethal confidence, and Marcus noticed the patch on her vest read, "Enforcer," beneath the angel's insignia. "Sable." Cage's voice cracked on the name. "What are you doing here?" stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your pathetic life, little brother. Sable stopped 10 feet from Cage's gun, unfazed by the weapon. Put it down before you embarrass yourself further. This is club business, Cage said, trying to regain control. You have no authority here. Sable laughed, bitter and sharp. I have every authority. I'm the one who's been investigating you for 6 months, tracking every dollar you stole, recording every conversation with the Iron Skulls. I'm the one who brought the national charter here tonight, 1,000 bikers from 15 states, to witness what happens to traitors. Margaret's grip on Marcus's hand tightened as hope flickered in her eyes. Reaper stood near the exit, his back still turned, but his shoulders had relaxed slightly. Something was happening that Marcus didn't fully understand yet. Cage's gun hand trembled. You're lying. You're just trying to save your reputation by exposing my own brother? Sable pulled out her phone and connected it to the diner's old television mounted in the corner. Audio crackled through the speakers. Cage's voice, crystal clear, talking to someone on the phone. Yeah, I've got Margaret Morrison coming to Chicago next week. Reaper's mom. Once we take her out, Reaper will go ballistic, and the war starts. You skulls hit 3 of our clubhouses while we're distracted, and I'll make sure our defenses are weak. 50-50 split on all territory after. Another voice responded. And the homeless kid? Collateral damage. We frame him for her murder, and nobody asks questions. Who cares about another Dead Street kid? The diner fell completely silent except for the recording. Marcus felt sick hearing Cage discuss his death so casually, like he was nothing. Like his life had no value beyond being a convenient scapegoat. Like and subscribe. You need to see how Reaper's been playing Cage this whole time. Sable switched to another recording. This one showed Cage meeting with Iron Skull's members at a warehouse, shaking hands, exchanging envelopes of cash. Bank statements appeared on screen showing offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. $847,000 embezzled from club funds over 4 years. That's enough. Reaper's voice cut through the room as he finally turned around. His face was stone, but his eyes blazed with fury Marcus hadn't seen before. Cage, you've been my brother since we were 16. I trusted you with my life, my club, my family. And you sold it all for money and revenge. Reaper, listen, Cage started, but Reaper closed the distance between them in 3 strides. I've been listening for 3 weeks. Every conversation monitored. Every move tracked. Sable came to me a month ago with suspicions, and we built the case together. Tonight was your test. Would you actually pull that trigger on my dying mother? Would you murder a 14-year-old kid for convenience? Reaper's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt louder than shouting. You failed, brother. You failed in every way that matters. Cage's face twisted with rage and desperation. You chose the club over me. I was there when your father died. I held you when you cried. And you chose. I chose nothing. Reaper roared. You made your choices. You contacted the Skulls. You embezzled. You tried to murder my mother. He stepped back, addressing the room full of bikers who'd crowded inside. Brothers, you've heard the evidence. You've seen the recordings. What's the vote? Exile. The bearded biker from earlier said immediately. Exile. Another voice echoed, and then another, until the word became a chant that filled the diner. Cage looked around wildly, seeing no allies, no sympathy, nothing but judgment. You're all fools, he spat. The Skulls will burn you to the ground, and I'll be there to watch. Sable moved faster than Marcus thought possible. She disarmed Cage in 2 movements, the gun clattering to the floor. You're exiled from the Hells Angels. Your patch is forfeit. You have 24 hours to leave Illinois, and if any angel ever sees you again, there won't be a second warning. She pulled out her phone again. And the FBI is very interested in your offshore accounts and weapons trafficking. I've been working with Agent Morrison from the Chicago field office for 2 months. Cage's eyes went wide with genuine fear. You turned federal witness? You betrayed the club to the government. I gave them you, Sable corrected. 1 traitor in exchange for immunity for club business. They're outside now, waiting to take you into custody. You're looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. The diner door opened, and 3 people in FBI windbreakers entered. Within minutes, Cage was handcuffed and led away, screaming threats that nobody acknowledged. The bikers parted like water, letting him pass, their faces showing nothing but contempt. Subscribe now. Marcus's reward will leave you speechless. When Cage was gone, Reaper finally turned to Margaret. His mask cracked completely, and Marcus saw the scared boy underneath the hardened biker. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had to make him think I'd turned on you. If he suspected I knew." "I know, baby. I know." Margaret stood shakily and crossed the distance between them. Reaper caught her as her legs gave out, and they held each other while both cried. 5 years of silence and pain dissolving in that embrace. Marcus looked away, feeling like an intruder on something private. But Sable approached him, her scarred face softening. "You're Marcus, right? The kid who saved her life." Marcus nodded, unable to find words. "The club owes you a debt." Sable gestured outside where hundreds of bikers had gathered. "We took up a collection. Every chapter that came tonight contributed. You're looking at $180,000. Enough to get you off the streets, get you educated, give you a real shot at life." Marcus's brain couldn't process the number. I can't. You can, and you will." Reaper joined them, one arm still around Margaret. "And I've already made arrangements. There's a couple in Portland, Oregon, former Angels who went straight, opened a motorcycle repair business. Good people. They've agreed to foster you, get you enrolled in school. You'll have a real home, Marcus. A real family." The charges against Marcus were dropped within 48 hours once Sable and Reaper testified to the truth. The media covered it extensively. Homeless teen hero saves dying woman from gang betrayal. But Marcus avoided the cameras, focused instead on the future opening up before him. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in a Portland high school hallway, his new foster parents waiting outside in their truck. In his backpack was a leather patch. Not a full Angels membership, but an honorary tribute with Protector stitched underneath. Margaret had given it to him the day before she entered hospice care, her cancer progressing rapidly. His phone buzzed with a text from Reaper. Photo of Margaret in her hospice bed, surrounded by flowers, smiling despite the pain. The caption read, "She wanted you to know, you gave her 3 more weeks she wouldn't have had. That's 3 weeks I got my mom back. Your family now, Marcus. Forever." Marcus looked up at his new school, took a deep breath, and walked through the doors. No longer invisible. No longer just surviving. For the first time in his life, people had his back. And sometimes, the family you earned on the coldest night of your life meant more than the one you were born into. Margaret passed away peacefully 21 days later with Reaper holding her hand, finally at peace with her son. The Hells Angels gave her a funeral attended by over 1,000 bikers. An honor reserved for family. And in the front row, wearing his Protector patch, Marcus stood beside his new foster family and said goodbye to the woman whose desperation had saved them both.